Welcome to the Anna Skoulikari Podcast. This is a podcast about exploring the human experience, and I'm Anna, the host. And in this episode, I spoke with Sophie Steffen about her journey experiencing anxiety and ultimately finding happiness. This journey has a lot of chapters, including going to a monastery and an experience with ayahuasca. And in this episode, we're going to hear Sophie tell her story. Sophie is 31 years old and lives in Barcelona, and she does a bunch of things. She's a freelance marketer and also offers meditation classes, coaching, and practices a Japanese martial art called Ninpo. And I'll let her tell you where she's from.
I'm originally from Germany, but I grew up in Argentina. We stayed there for 6 years. When I was 5, we moved there. And when I was 11, we came back to Germany. And the story behind that is also quite interesting. My dad was given the opportunity to go abroad. He's a teacher, so he could teach at the German schools abroad. And he had 2 decisions in his head. One was Moscow, and the other was Buenos Aires. And the day they had to make the decision where they would go, it was literally like last minute decision. So I could have ended up somewhere in Siberia by now. But yeah, the decision was going to Buenos Aires for 6 years. When we came back, we spent another 5 years in Germany. And then my parents moved 6 years to the States. I was there with them for a year and a half, and then came back to Germany to pursue my studies because the States is very expensive to study. And then I started the bachelor's in Germany, had kind of this exchange program with Australia, where I met my boyfriend. And that's the reason I ended up in Barcelona to settle here for the last, I think it's been 8 years that I'm living here in Barcelona.
Next, we dove into how she started experiencing anxiety.
The anxiety part probably started in my teenage years. It was a little rough coming back from Argentina to Germany. The culture impact, kind of two very different societies in my head. So clashing against one another. It was for me very difficult and different to come back to this new reality. And yeah, I think this whole experience of instability started. And it was the trigger for my anxiety was when I was 18, 19, and I broke up with my ex-boyfriend. So we broke up because it wasn't working out anymore, and he was supporting me a lot. I was living on my own. My parents were still in the States. I was in Germany. So he was kind of that pillar to sustain me, kind of the person who was giving me halt in life. And when that broke away, there was this big hole that created the sense of, oh my God, bottomless. where am I now? So again, the sense of floating in the air, not knowing where I am, who I am, feeling utterly alone, abandoned. And that's when this whole anxiety started day after day to kick in. So first it was more the kind of feeling anxious to be on my own at home. Then fear started to kick in when I was during the night. I couldn't sleep. I had fears about my thoughts, about dying, about becoming crazy. I have my own thoughts. So it was the more the anxiety proceeded, the less I could trust myself. And it was becoming so severe that I barely couldn't sleep. I had to wait always until the next morning when the sun rises to be able to find rest. I was sleeping a lot at friends' places or having them sleep at my place because I could barely relax. And it was so severe that I thought about going on meds, but I was also afraid of taking meds because I was afraid of anything that could even alter my mind even more. And yeah, that was kind of the starting point where I said I have to do something. And my idea was going somewhere far away, far away from the civilization, which I felt was the root cause. somehow, like the society where I created so many expectations of who I should be, how I should be. And I wanted to just go far away to Vietnam, Thailand, or whatever, somewhere to the mountains, living with monks. I had this image of myself going to monastery, and it wasn't Thailand in the end. It was New York, because my dad had done an archery course in a monastery there. It was a Zen monastery. It was in the mountains of the state New York, so there were some mountains there. But yeah, it wasn't the original plan. In the end, that was the start of the month I spent there.
So tell me about this monastery.
What struck me the most was when I arrived there, everybody seemed so happy, but not this happiness, this superficial happiness. It was something deep, like a deep peace, a deep joy, contentment. And you could see it in their faces, in their whole being, something that radiated outside. All the monks were super happy in their being, and they didn't have anything. I mean, they were living like a monastic life. So that was the first impression I had. The second was the next day when they woke me up at 3 a.m. I was like, oh, fuck. I'm not an early morning person, and that was tough. Followed by a 2-hour meditation, then a breakfast, then doing some garden work, then another 2-hour meditation. Then suddenly I was sitting in meditation, and I remember that moment when I was sitting there trying to focus on my breath, and then suddenly next to me I hear this big bang. So I was like, I almost jumped like a cat. And later I learned that it's called the kyosaku. It's the awakening stick. So it's actually a practice that when you're sleepy or you have a lot of pain, originally the senior monk would hit you. Nowadays you can ask for being hit by the stick, and it's not that you're being punished for something. It's you get hit on some pressure points on your shoulders, and that helps you to maintain your mind alert. The first time I heard the bang, I was, oh my God, where am I here? Another 28 days to go, and I was already dying. But again, there was something to this simple life and the simplicity of just sitting there, sitting with your pain, sitting with your thoughts, that I connected immediately. And I knew that was the start of my path to heal myself, to recover, because it was seeing the world from a different place. It's throughout just sitting there, being aware of your breath, just taking one inhale, one exhale, where you can really rest and find the peace. And then the last week of the monastery was quite interesting. It was called a sesshin. So the meaning of it is touching the spirit, touching your true being, your true self. It's very, very intense. So it's 8-9 hours per day meditation. You don't look people in the eye. It's a silent retreat, and you don't hold the door for anybody. So it's really like directing the gaze inwardly, just focusing on everything you do. And everybody was telling me all the time at session something amazing happens, and I was full of expectations. So when is this thing going to happen? And the first day passed, the second day my legs were hurting, my back was hurting. I was like, where is this thing that's supposed to happen? Nothing happened. And then the last day, I remember I was in the garden sitting and doing some, just like rubbing my feet, doing like a little massage. I had like, my whole body was so sore. And I was just focusing on massaging my feet. And in that moment, it was this moment of being completely in the now, only with the awareness in the action of massaging my feet. And the world disappeared. I was so present. The past, the future didn't exist. My mind was completely still. So it was pure consciousness and the act of massaging my feet. And that was this moment of awakening almost to a new reality, this glimpse of a new truth that I knew this was going to be the thing I was going to teach and pursue, and that was the path I had to follow. And when the session was over, the whole month of staying at the monastery was also over, and I felt my senses just amplified in a way I had never felt or smelled or viewed things the way I could sense them in that way. So everything was amplified by 3, 4. So kind of the seeing the world with different eyes. So the world didn't change. I had changed my viewpoint. That was beautiful.
Tell me more about this experience of leaving the monastery and reintegrating back into normal life.
My parents were still living in New York, meaning we also went to visit the city, Manhattan. A few days later, they picked me up from the monastery. And again, I was still in the state of expansion, of being able to absorb everything in this amplified way. And I remember going to Manhattan, everything was so loud. It was a horrible experience. I just wanted to go back to the monastery, to this quiet state in my mind. I felt the voices and the noises were coming in my body. I could feel the city, and it wasn't joyful after all. So it was also this doubt in my head that, do I, in order to be that peaceful, do I need to lock myself, or do I have to be isolated from the world? So it was kind of also this, I don't know, this question in my head that remained. So can I go back to my normal life and still feel that peace? And for me in that moment, the answer was no, because it was just, it felt so wrong. Yeah, I kept continuing going to retreats in order to, it was almost like a gas station to fill up my spiritual power there, to boost up, and then coming back to life where you slowly this tank would empty. And then at some point I knew I was anxious again. So it was always this fill up, and I was still searching for a method where I could maintain this state, and I knew I could be there. So I started to meditate more, and having 3-4 hours in my daily life of meditation where I could keep this level. But then again, some things were just like pulling me off my life. So it was this constant search for finding this happiness, and always this anxiety kind of luring there.
About 10 years later, I think, is when you ended up having another really intense experience with ayahuasca, and we're going to get into that. But I wanted to ask you, in those 10 years, were there any other moments or experiences that are memorable with you dealing with your anxiety? What was the way that you handled your anxiety during that time?
So I found a tool that I knew I could use. Maybe I was too self-assured that it would always be the tool that would always work. And sometimes it didn't work. And then I felt again abandoned and desperate. So there was a time when moving to Barcelona, I think 3 years later, my dad had a stroke, and it was these life events, moving the thing with my dad, that the anxiety started to hit in again in a very, very profound level, very intense. And I was doing more meditation, but somehow the anxiety had taken over again. So I felt I couldn't manage it with the meditation. So I actually at some point decided to go on meds. The thing is, I was so afraid of meds, and I was rejecting it from my deepest inner being. I don't know what happened. The thing is, I bought the meds. It was this depressant or something. Well, I had to go to a psychiatrist, and the dose was, I think, 1 tablet, and then slowly you had to continue increasing the dose. So it was a week or 2 to prep your body. So when I had to take it, it was right after a nap, and I was so nervous. I somehow took double of the doses. And after taking it, I was so in shock. I was like, fuck. My head was spinning. I was having all these ideas of what would happen. And I don't know if it was placebo effect or the real side effects of taking the double dose, probably a combination of both. I started to feel so dizzy. I felt drunk, like in a boat. So when I walked the streets, I felt I was doing S lines, but I was walking straight. And just because of this whole pressure I built myself up to, I took them another 3-4 days, and then I had signed up for a retreat, a weekend retreat. And I remember, and it has been a half year I haven't been to a retreat. And I remember that after the first meditation, something clicked again, and I could take the distance of my anxiety and the observer. So I knew it wasn't like glued together. I could again make the separation somehow. I didn't manage to do it before in the last half year or year. And again, things were just so obvious to me that, oh my God, it's just the anxiety. I don't have to be afraid of the anxiety. It's just observing it, not identifying with it. And I stopped taking the meds immediately. I went back to my practice. I went back to be more disciplined about my health, my routine. And again, I managed to balance it out. So from that moment on, I was very serious about not going back to that anxiety taking over my life. I knew I had to still go to retreats in order to keep that, but I was like, okay, I have to do it in order to maintain my mental health.
And after you had this experience where you had been knocked out of balance, you had taken the meds, then you ended up going to this retreat and being able to stop the meds immediately. Did you have more experiences where you were knocked out of balance again?
The anxiety did have some effects where I had to still struggle, but I felt I could handle it. The ayahuasca experience obviously was something that knocked me off in a different way, because I also continued in my martial art practice. That was something that helped me a lot to also gain strength and courage to trust myself and my body and my mind again more and more. That practice helped me to root myself, to ground myself, to keep a balance, which then from that moment on built up. So I didn't feel anything knocked me off the way it had done before.
So tell me about your ayahuasca experience. How did you end up pursuing that?
Yeah, that's I think one of the life events I will have if I ever turn 80. Probably that will be my top 3. So the monastery top 1, ayahuasca top 2. I'll have another one probably in another 10 years or so. I was always afraid of psychedelics. I was freaking out just thinking about taking any LSD, mushrooms, anything. But it was always something that I was very intrigued by, because it was this whole experiencing the mind. I initially wanted to study psychology, so everything related to the mind was something that was interesting to me. So this expansion of the consciousness in an altered way, I was, that maybe someday. I knew I wouldn't be doing it because of the anxiety in my mind going crazy, having a bad trip. I think I wouldn't handle it. But then something happened. My 30th birthday, my parents, they made me a present. It was the singing course, and I wrote an article about it in my blog, very detailed. It was about this experience that I had while singing, that I reconnected to a lost connection in a way that opened up something in my heart. since then I take singing classes, and whenever I sing, it's again feeling this from my heart, something that you can connect to your spirit or your higher being, or however you want to call it. So this connection was established again. And I had listened to the Tim Ferriss show previously, and Gabor Mate was on it talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and how you could treat anxiety and traumas with ayahuasca. And I was very, very surprised. Anxiety for me was, I had panic attacks, and suddenly one of the strongest psychedelic plants was supposed to heal you. So I don't know, something was there, like the seed was planted, and after the singing course, I knew I could do it. I knew I had the strength, the courage, and I had to do it. It was even weirder that something inside me was telling me I have to do this. And by the time we were going to go to Japan for 4 months with my boyfriend, it was like a leave sabbatical for my work, and it was going to happen in the next 3-4 months. So I knew I wanted to do it before that, and I looked up retreat centers, and yeah, then I signed up for a whole weekend.
So tell me about this experience. How was it, and how did it change you, or what did you learn from it?
It was a mind fuck. It was really going through maybe a little bit heaven, then hell, and then paradise. The whole thing started in a house. We were 14, 15 people, and we got to know each other. Quite interesting profiles. There was a woman in her late 50s. She was an alcoholic, and she was telling me about her addiction. There was another guy. He had a sickness, a terminal sickness. They had given him another 2-3 years. So really profound stories in the retreat. So immediately you connect. And there's also a therapist. So it's not just about taking drugs and having a party. It's about everybody was seeking some sort of transformation. And that's also the purpose. You go there with an intention that what do you want to let go of, and what do you want to invite? And I wanted to let go of my anxiety, my fears, my insecurities for real. I knew maybe it wasn't going to be gone, but I wanted to let go of that part, to forgive myself, and I invited love and happiness, and I wanted to know, what is it, happiness? I had so many ideas of what it should be or could be, but I really wanted to know what it is for me. And it was a 2-day retreat. The first day usually get a lower dose portion. I had some light hallucinations, some geometrical figures, very beautiful. I thought, oh, this is nice. They say that ayahuasca gives you what you need and not what you want. I knew that ayahuasca was being kind on me the first night because I was so fucking afraid. Then the second day, we were giving the same amount, but it was higher dosed, because after 10-15 minutes I started noticing the effects immediately, and it was different this time. So the room is in a way that everybody is lying kind of in a circle on their mats. You have a bucket in front of you, because usually you have to throw up, you have to puke, it's the purging of letting go. So it's also this physical act of letting it out. And I was lying there with my eyes closed, and I already heard people next to me either puking or laughing or crying, but I could relax, and I knew that I wanted to experience the whole deal. I knew that I had to open myself up in order to really go to the depth, and I was ready. And that's when the ayahuasca started to kick in. I had these beautiful hallucinations first about plants and animals, green, blue. Everything was very, very beautiful. I was lying there and looking at it, and it started to spin faster. My stomach was aching a little bit from the day before, but suddenly this amazing tree grew out of my stomach into the sky, and I was just amazed by it and lying there. And then suddenly everything started to spin faster, and I was still enjoying it somehow. But then this one thought crossed my mind, which changed everything. It was, what if I have a bad trip now? What if I get scared? What if my anxiety comes back? And then everything, the spinning stopped, and it was as though iron metal cages came around me, and this feeling of being suffocated in there. And I just immediately had to puke and just throwing up and feeling so desperate, and feeling that it was just the beginning. Not even half an hour had passed. I knew another 5 hours would come, and I was horrified. I was horrified by what would happen next. And it wasn't this sense of being afraid. It was more a feeling of utter loneliness came over me, of being alone in this world, of being just on my own, abandoned. I screamed for help because I just couldn't handle it anymore. And you have all these sensations and feelings and thoughts that are amplified by 1,000. So it wasn't like the monastery experience. It was amplified in such an intense way, you can't escape. I talked to the guy, the facilitator, and I told him I wanna leave, I wanna go. It was feeling as though when your body aches, when you have the flu, and you just want it to be over because it hurt so much. And then all these memories came popping up into my head from my childhood when my parents left our place, and I was feeling alone when the first time I was aware of death crossed my mind. All these moments of suffering, and I was in the state of, okay, I can't anymore. And then I was asking, crying for help. The guy came, and I told him I want to leave, and he said, where do you want to go? I said, I wanted to stop. And he said, well, that's the experience. You have to let go. You're in control. Just focus on your breath. Inhale and exhale. And I was like, what is he telling me? Just like, make it stop. But I knew obviously he couldn't make it stop. So I remember the moments in the monastery where I also was in such pain. My knees were hurting, my back was hurting. And I was like, oh my God, it's the same thing. So I tried to just be with the breath, come to the observer, and just see everything as an outsider. Just let everything pass through, not reject it. It's the opposite, just inviting everything, but then letting go. So not trying to identify with it, breathing in, breathing out. And slowly that practice again that I knew from the last 10 years, I knew, okay, that's it again. Why didn't I come to that conclusion before? So I was still in a lot of pain, mental and physical. It was still awful, but I didn't identify with it. I could relax. It's relax and then let go. And then something clicked, and this feeling of deep love, deep inner love for this whole existence of the universe, for every single being, of this love that is infinite, that everybody has. This abundance inside of myself started to come from an inner being. I opened my mouth. I don't know how this tone came out. It sounded wonderful for me in that moment. It was as though like a light beam went into the sky. I saw everything was light, and the guy said, okay, same as before, try to redirect this energy, this positive energy inside. Same as before. Don't try to become obsessed by it, because then you want to be in the state the whole time. So that's what I did. Again, like the meditation, you inhale this emotion, you exhale it, and suddenly I could just be there and enjoy myself, because I wasn't identifying with the content of my mind, the content of my emotions. And that moment I knew that's true happiness. So that was a pretty cool experience and realization, that which I already knew somehow, but sometimes we forget, and you have these moments of, again, like small awakenings. And then the whole transformation starts, which is the daily work. It's not just, okay, now that's it. That was also when I left the monastery. I thought, okay, that's it. And I was like, okay, lean back, I've done the work. No, it's the other way around. It's these small steps that you can maintain your consciousness, your awareness, and maintain this inner state of peace, of joy, not wanting to change the outer world.
This intense experience was right before you ended up going for 4 months on a sabbatical. Can you tell me about the sabbatical?
The sabbatical was this plan my boyfriend and I, it was more a dream because we didn't know if it would come true, to train 4 months with our master from the martial arts, living there in Japan, training from Monday to Sunday every day, morning and evening, and just leaving our jobs. I was lucky that I was given a leave, sabbatical leave, which at the time I didn't know that I wouldn't come back, but my intention was that I was going to come back. So I had these 4 months to really let go of everything my work life was related to, and just let myself immerse into this experience, into this adventure with my boyfriend. And nothing big really happened, like a big life-changing event, but the whole event itself was life-changing.
So you left thinking you're going to go for a sabbatical and come back to your work, but you didn't end up coming back to your work. Can you tell me about that?
That wasn't the plan, but sometimes things end up going in a direction you haven't planned. I signed up for some freelance work, which did not end up happening. So I was already a freelancer when I went there without any projects. I started to work with my shaman, and he was into deep coaching. In just our first coaching session, I already got 1 client, and my income tripled. And I knew that, oh my God, this is something very unexpected. Am I supposed to just go back to my life as nothing would have happened, or is this really an opportunity to step up the game and start creating the life that I had dreamed of and wasn't courageous enough to really speak out loud? That I wanted to work less, earn more. Isn't that what everybody wants? Being able to construct the stuff I have and do in my life around my life, not having my work and construct the life around that work, which occupies a big chunk, and actually do the work I love, which I was already doing, but maybe also for other companies, I would feel more aligned with their mission. Working for people I feel inspired to work for, in projects I feel that are aligned with my values and what I want to see in society. So I started to understand how you can create that reality just by asking for it. Sometimes we're too afraid to even ask, because what happens if things turn out the way we actually dream of? And that's what happened. The decision wasn't easy to quit, because I had this one job, then another. It was a project based, so I knew maybe it would end in a month, and 2-3 months. I had 2,000 euros left on my bank account, no savings. I had these 2 gigs I landed, and yeah, I triplicated my income, but I knew, okay, maybe that's just luck. And what happens if after that I don't get any clients? And with the money I got from my 2 first jobs, I paid another almost 2K program with the shaman. So I spent again my savings I had to work on that mindset, because I knew it's so important that you don't let your fears take over and you focus on the stuff, on the direction where you want to go, and not on all the stuff that can happen. And it's a mind change, and I was afraid of not making more money, signing up more clients, afraid of losing clients. Whereas now I started to shift that mindset towards, okay, if I lose a client, it was easy to get the first client on board. So just use the same approach, be honest, sincere, get on a conversation, ask people to help you out, ask for referrals, ask in your network. And when you start putting the message out there, the universe will respond. It sounds cheesy, but that was what I experienced. I wrote a letter to myself, what I would want to see in the next 6 months. Everything came true. And I didn't even put a lot of effort in it. It was just taking action, small steps at a time, being perseverant on the things, and just not letting my mind get in the way. I was asking for higher fees. I did bold requests because that was part of the course, the shamanic course I did. Make a bold request. It's asking. Obviously, you have to add value, but if you add that value and the person sees that you're adding that value, why wouldn't they pay you more? If you're also triplicating their leads, their income, their happiness.
This 4-month sabbatical also produced a book that you wrote. Can you tell me about this book?
Yes, the book started initially 2 years earlier. The content of the book was related to this whole journey from my anxiety, my fears, this place of really darkness, where it touched the bottom, and this journey of discovering tools and methods and meditation, shamanism, coaching, the building the courage, the mindset. Brené Brown, I love her. Michael Singer, also Tony Robbins, Tim Ferriss, all these people out there that you can relate to and see role models in them. And there's so much knowledge in the internet, so you can connect to any big master out there. And that process of finding your own mix, because that's all about finding your own path in this vast ocean of knowledge, but within, not without. And the book documents this experiment of how you can find, or how I found, because that's in the end everybody's has a different journey, but I think there are a lot of things that help people, especially when it comes to that we think how life should look like. And I would consider myself an achiever or high performer. When I want to achieve something, I achieve it. And I traveled the world. I traveled through South America, to Asia, to Australia, to New Zealand, to the States. So I don't know how many countries I visited. I was always looking for new experiences, more exciting things. In the search, I was searching for something, and I moved to countries where there's sun. I moved and bought a place, and all the things I had planned in my life, I somehow achieved. And even what I thought would bring me happiness, if I work less, have more time, earn more, can meditate, and still there was this missing piece. I just found out in this last year, after the ayahuasca, when I also wrote the article, Surrender is the Only Path to Happiness, when I understood that it's not about the outside world. It's not about what the projection of what your mind thinks that should happen, how your inner state should look like. If you feel this way, then that's the happiness. It's this being completely detached from what you want, your preferences, and being okay how life unfolds itself in front of you, and starting to engage with that. And that's coming back to the book. That's kind of what I wanted to document. I just had this feeling, same as I wanted to go to the ayahuasca, that I just wanted to write it down. But ultimately it's that what I found is the more you let go of your expectations, of your ideas of how life should look like, that the more you can relax into it and just be in this joy, enjoy the moment after moment, how they unfold.
And now that you've gone through this journey of being able to kind of realize some things about your anxiety, you've reached a point in your life where you can kind of guide others or help others through some of their own journeys, through meditation classes, coaching, finishing this book that you can then share with the world. Can you tell me about how that is now, being able to guide others or to pass on to others what you have learned in your own journey?
The most important learning for me is to let go of the actual result, of not thinking about how many people I want to reach. No, it's more continue letting go. That's the practice. And if things will unfold, if I continue coaching people, if I continue my classes, that's great. And if not, that's also great. Then life wasn't meant to be that way. But I won't be able to control the outcome. So I will be offering courses, I will be offering stuff, but if no one shows up, yeah, I can continue doing that. I feel there's like, everybody has this calling, or what you love to do, it will eventually unfold, but without it having to be in a certain way. So being detached from the result, being okay however it will unfold. And it's, the practice really starts in everyday life. There are so many situations every day where you can surrender, where you can let go. Talking to your partner, talking to your boss, talking to yourself, observing that. It's the sum of the little things.
So in the end, what has your journey of dealing with your anxiety and finding your happiness taught you?
What it has taught me, this whole journey, is that I was constantly looking for happiness outside, either in my studies, in my relationships, in my trips, my travels, even in my spiritual practice. There was this spiritual ego I was building, because I had these moments of bliss, and I thought I would have to be in that state the whole time to find happiness. And I got it all wrong. It's stepping out of that mind game, and that's the beauty. It's so simple in the end, and we overcomplicate it with all our ideas and our stories about ourselves and how things should be. And that's why we want others to change, because then we haven't made the order in ourselves. So we should start cleaning up within, and then everything else is fine.
Awesome. Sophie, thank you so much for sharing your journey. And
thanks
for telling us your whole story in its realness and in all detail. So that was Sophie's experience, her authentic journey. What I want to do with this podcast is to create a space to explore the human experience and how rich and diverse it is. And I want to do so with curiosity and with inspiration rather than with prescription in mind. In other words, to be inspired by other people's journeys, but with the awareness that each and every one of us is on our own journey, and that looks different for every single person. Lastly, I also want to mention that the book that we discussed is currently being rewritten. And finally, the last thing is to thank you all for listening and for going on this auditory journey with us.